marine diesel enthusiasts. Today we're going to be diving into these engines, the Ivecos in this boat, and we're going to be checking the oil levels. We currently did a cruise around about 100 nautical miles after it had a full service, and we've not checked them since. So it'll be a cold start, checking the oil levels, checking the gearbox levels. But before we can do that, we need to remove all the internals of the boat. These floors are a bit of a nightmare, as you're going to find out. Let's get on with it. So we've now unveiled the 250 horsepower Iveco engines. Now these engines are about 1996, same year as the boat, turbo diesel 6-cylinder, and they're a cracking engine. I mean, literally, kind of so far faultless, and that's what I like to keep that way. So obviously last time we went out, as I just mentioned before, we did 100 nautical miles after a full service, and I haven't checked them since to make sure there's no leaks, there's no problems. So this is what we're going to do. So first of all, we need to locate the dipstick. So on these engines, obviously the engines are a matching pair, so the dipstick on this side will also be on this side. So locating the dipstick hole is just at the back of this engine, as you can see. So we'll remove that and just check the levels. Now unfortunately guys, in this type of layout of boat, as you may have just noticed, the way they've designed the floors in this boat, it's not the most accessible engine room you can ever kind of imagine to get into. So if you need to get in here in a hurry, there's a bit of a mission involved, as you may have just noticed. So there's got to be a simpler way of doing this. I mean, this is a quick access here to get to the engine, into the engine room, but unfortunately the sections of flooring they put in, which is just over there as you can see, they're quite a big piece to take out, and if you're at sea and you need to get here in a hurry, it's not the most convenient. So we do have to think of another method of modifying this floor so we can get access to this without having to lift the entire floors out, as you can see. So back to the oil guys. So dipstick here, we'll just get that out and just have a check. These engines haven't been run for quite a while, so as you can see I've just dipped the dipstick now, and it is saying it's currently showing the max. Oil's starting to blacken slightly after that 100 nautical mile. We were running the boat at around 14 to 17 knots, pretty much the whole journey, and it was probably running for a good 6 or 7 hours in total. Let's just check that now. So right back into the oil, at that level. So yeah, it's just, if you can just see that, it's just below the max, just a tiny little smidgen. But that's pretty good, you know, it's well above any limit that I'll be worried about, so that's really, really good. I don't think it's worth just topping that up for that little tiny bit, because it's only been run, like I say, for minimal hours. So that one's good. Obviously when you're checking your engines guys, also make sure that you are using the correct marine diesel engine oil. So this one's 1540 mineral oil. So the fuel filter system on this boat, some people have polishers and stuff which are a better idea, the diesel polishing systems, but this is just running standard from the factory, this boat, still to this day. So here we have the pre-filter, which is basically the water separator plus a small filter in that. So it runs through there and then it makes its way through here to the engine block, and on the back of the engine block here we have the main fuel filter. So that's the diesel system here in this boat. There's no polishing system on it, which another addition we could put on in the future would be the diesel polishing system. And then on the actual oil side of things guys, so I'll just dive into here. This one's the easiest to show you. We have the two main oil filters on the engine as well. So they're quite easy accessible on the starboard side, but unfortunately the port side is a little bit more challenging. So I'm just going to move the helm seat out of the way because I need access to my battery switches, which are just located under this step here, which slides out. And under here, I've got my port and starboard batteries, which are currently isolated. Also very important, guys, another very important thing to do is always make sure you've turned your seacocks on before you start your engines up. So on here, the seacocks are either side of the boat, quite accessible, but the problem is, of course, as you've noticed on the floors of this boat, accessing the seacocks becomes quite difficult because you're then having to remove all your floors every time you've been out on the boat. I do tend to leave the seacocks open, guys, I won't lie. I don't always switch them off. Winter time, of course, I isolate everything, but in the summer, I'll leave them turned on. We have plenty of bilge pumps and loads of alarm systems on board to kind of alert us if any bilge water comes in. So both seacocks are turned on. I've just turned the power on for these engines, and we're now going to give them the cold start for the first time in about the last month or so since they were last run. So here we go, we'll give it a cold start. I'm just going to turn the key on for the starboard engine first, and I'm going to run this up because there's a reason why I need to run the engines up as well. Oil level's fine, we know that's okay on the engine itself, but when it's not running, the oil level's way over the dipstick level. So the correct way of checking the gearbox oil on these particular engines and gearbox, well, this particular gearbox, is to check whilst it's running. Now, unfortunately, this engine here, the starboard engine, is extremely difficult to access the gearbox oil levels, which is a real pain. But it's just, well, I don't mean it's a pain for me to access it. I mean it's a pain for me to video it upside down in the bilge where I've got to hang over the top of the engine, which is the most fun part. But I can document quite easily the port side. So we'll start this engine up first and we'll give it a cold start and we can see how these bad boys run for the first time in a month from freezing cold. Okay, so here we go, let's start her up. Make sure it's in neutral, give it a tiny bit of throttle, and then we'll check to make sure we're pumping plenty of water. As you can see, she's pumping plenty of water, so I'm happy that the cooling system's all right. So now we'll get back inside and let her warm up a touch, and we'll check the gearbox levels. So back to idle now, idling beautifully. It's hooked a little bit whilst it's cold, but now it's back on idle now, it's ready to go. Always check your oil pressure first, it's pretty important checking oil pressure. I'm quite happy with the oil pressure on that engine. I'm now going to try and delve into the gearbox if possible. Here we go. So I'm just trying to get the dipstick out. I managed to do that. Oh. We'll give that a clean off. And then we'll get it back in and see what the levels are looking like. Not the easiest access, this particular one. So as you can see, I don't think you can see that, guys, but there's the maximum level, and it's actually sat perfectly on that level. You can see the boosting on there. You can see it's right, so I know that gearbox is right, and if you look at the oil, it's still absolutely brand spanking new. That's what I like to see. So also, as you can see, guys, these gearboxes are an IRM 220A. Just for your information, the gearboxes. And you can see they run on an SAE 30 oil, which was very expensive. Okay, I'm going to shut these engines down now. That's a little bit quieter. So as you can see, the engine, to check the gearbox oil on this engine's not easy. There's not real the best access to it. I mean, you can remove this back panel here, and then you can get a little bit better access to it, but if you're working on them and have to do any major work, all these sections of the floor do come out completely, so you have full access to the engines, and that's the way I do it when I'm servicing them. They're an easy engine to service. They have a great prime pump for the diesel system to pump the fuel back through. You don't even have to fill the filters back up properly. You know, normally you get a can of fuel, fill the filter up, screw them back on. Now the reason why I didn't do that on these engines, guys, is because this particular filter at the back here, the big fuel filter, that one I showed you before, if you fill that filter up first, then try and get it in the hole, you have to put it on an angle like that to get it in. And any fuel you put in there, you guarantee to spill it all over your bilges, and there's nothing worse than the smell of diesel in your bilges. Also, I don't like leaving the engines idling too long when they're not under load. Now, marine diesel engines need to be worked. If you leave them idling, some people sit in a marina to try and warm the hot water tank up, and they'll leave their engine idling for hours upon hours upon hours. It's far from good for the engines at all, in the slightest. They don't like it. Yes, you can do it once in a blue moon, but it's not recommended. So normally when I run these engines up, guys, I have them in gear, and they're also under a bit of load, so you're actually putting a bit of pressure on the prop to kind of make the engine work. Obviously it helps bring the temperature up a lot quicker. Because I'm not in gear today, because I'm on the Moon and I don't want to do any damages to any pontoons by putting her into gear, then of course I ain't going to do that today. So we haven't let it run too long, just enough to check the gearbox levels and obviously the oils, which was great on this engine. The only thing I haven't checked on this engine so far is the coolant levels. Now the coolant levels look good, but what I do need to check, which I haven't got with me today, is some more coolant, and I need to have a little tester to see what coolant levels are in the engine. We have got winter coming up. It's going to be very, very cold normally at winter time here in the UK. So I do need to check to make sure the coolant levels are up to standard for the winter conditions. But so I need a tester for that, and I also need some up-to-date coolant because I haven't got any on board, unfortunately. If we have a problem, we use the water. But so far these engines have never ever run warm. They just run perfect temperature. Oil pressures are great, and they're a fantastic engine. And these engines, guys, have only done 800 hours. So the boat's 1996, and these engines have only done 800 hours or so. So actually, just double check. I don't want to be inaccurate with my engine hours. Even less, 764 hours aside. Yeah, 764, and that one's done 761. So, because boats spend a lot of the time tied up in the marina, they don't get the use they should. But sometimes I have found, guys, of previous boats I've owned, and I've owned many boats. Some of these engines, you can have them with literally 400 hours on, and the engines are scrap because they don't get maintained, they don't get the use. And some engines, I found better engines with 3,000, 4,000 hours on them, maybe more, that are in better shape than some of the boats I bought with 400 hours on the engines. So having a low hour engine means it's not being used, and these engines need to be used to keep everything fresh, keep everything maintained, and keep everything nice. So the trick is to actually use your boat. And I can't say that because we've only used this one once this year. So I'll take a leaf out of my own boot next year, guys. The channel's going to be blown up here now because we're going to be out in this boat and we're going to be testing it to its limits. And we're going to be burning thousands of pounds with the diesel. And into the port engine now, guys. Port engine. So on the port engine, dipstick's just here. Quite accessible on this side because obviously they're a matching pair. So everything that's on the opposite side, of course, is on this side. The dipstick's just here, so we'll just try and remove that. They are quite stiff to get out, these ones. I don't want to spill any oil in my bilges. It's one thing I do hate, oil everywhere. Alright, so this one looks actually fantastic as well. I'll give it a clean off and we'll have a proper dip. So of course you've got the indicators on here. You've got your minimum and maximum levels. Now obviously when you're servicing these engines and you're changing the filters, they're actually quite an easy engine to service, which is really good. Now always just double check that, you know, you might fill it up to the maximum level, but the minute you've then started up for the first time with new filters on, you are going to have to come back and check it after a little bit of time of running. Just run it for the sake of, you know, a few minutes or so, and then come back and then recheck your oil levels to make sure they are sat on the maximum level, because it will drop considerably for the size of the filters that are on these type of engines. Right, I'm pulling it out now, go. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just on the max mark perfectly on that one. You can just see it glistening. Now the downside is there, both engines have been run in synchronization perfectly for the whole trip we did, and this engine's burnt no oil whatsoever, and that engine has burnt a little bit of oil. So, I mean, I'm not worried about that whatsoever, but it just goes to show one's using no oil whatsoever currently on a 100 nautical mile trip. I know it's not many hours and not much time running, but that one has dropped a tiny little bit. So good. I'm happy with that engine on the oil levels. So guys, on this engine, it's a little bit more, you can actually see where the dipstick is on the port side because it's just there. Now, of course, when I was working on that starboard side, then I'm on the opposite side and we have the exhaust system right in the way, and obviously all your electrical systems and cables everywhere. So it's quite difficult to access the gearbox levels apart from this port engine, which is really good for access. So currently this engine's not been started either, and I can't physically check the gearbox oil on this engine until it's started up. So what I'll do now, we'll fire this one up and see how she's... It really helps when you're 6'1" working in here. Hey, the joys of boating. Okay, out of gear, bit of throttle just to give it a bit of a nudge. Oh yes, oil pressure, beautiful, looking good, looking good. Let's check the air, make sure she's pumping water. I'm going in. Now, as you can see, that is the top level on the dipstick, and it is absolutely perfect, and the oil is so clean. I don't recommend it for safety reasons that you taste your gearbox oil. It looks so nice. It just looks so tempting just to taste the flavours of them gearboxes. Okay, so we're going to shut this down now. Shut this engine down. Switch the engine room lights off. Guys, I didn't realise I hadn't turned the engine room lights on. I can see what I was doing then. It's so much better to work when you can actually see what you're doing. So we'll switch them off. So guys, I would like to thank my wife today for being the camera woman. She's just say hello, Claire.
Hi.
Hi. So wife made it a lot easier today by doing the footage for me. Just to kind of, when you work on engines, it's very difficult to get the cameras in the kind of right places. Hopefully it comes out okay. So guys, I'll stop waffling now. It is time for to say good night and goodbye and God bless to you all. And I will see you guys on the next video.